Okay, so I'm going to share with you the story of my news desk. And it all started with Dojan having this great idea that he picked up somewhere. And he came to me sitting in a cellar with an ad agency. And I was at the moment trying to pick up or start launch a PR company, a digital PR company. And, but this idea was very fascinating, and I felt instantly that this was really interesting for us to do together. So at the time, we were sitting together at one desk, and we were in a situation where I had been given this desk by a friend of mine at this ad agency just to help me out to start. And so Dojan was actually biking, as he is still doing right now. He was biking to the office, taking a shower in one of the bigger parks here in Stockholm, and went up to the office and sit next to me. And we had the notion that Andreas, which was the agency guy, that he didn't understand that Dojan was starting this business together with me. And obviously, of course he was, and he was really kind to let us have this opportunity. So it's all started at this desk, and we actually sat 3 persons there at the time when we pretty early recruited a young girl to help us out with all the administration around the service. So the first year we more or less spent in research and talking with journalists. Christopher comes from the journalist side. He has been working a lot as editor, as journalist, as photographer, etc., etc. So he noticed that the way that people or the industry were handling PR or press releases was actually by faxing it. So and for us coming from a web background, that was obviously a very good window opportunity to venture into. We have met a couple of years earlier at a web agency called Spray, which was pretty sort of well known here in Sweden, as that was one of the first web agencies here in Sweden, and actually one of the few in the world that was very sort of focused on the web. And we started out that at 1995. So I was doing more of the communication consultancy, and Christopher came from the content background. So he worked a lot with the web portals that we were trying to build. Fun Sport, and we did a travel agency, and etc., etc. So we were very used to disrupt the industry and talk about the web and how you could communicate through the web. So when we got into the PR industry, we noticed that it was a monopoly. It was the current session that was in place. They were divided in 2 different players. That was the Waymaker, and which was the sending press releases through fax, and it was the Observer, that is the monitoring side. And they actually had a business by cutting out articles that they found. So they had human people sitting in the northern part of Sweden and actually cutting out articles that customers would like them to monitor. So that was a crazy time, and it was pretty easy to see that industry would change pretty quickly when the web was taking off a second time. And at that time, both Christopher and myself were sort of doing the research. We were talking with both communicators, information specialists, and journalists. But we lacked something, right? So we lacked someone who could actually make a good web service for us. So at this time, David Venegren, the third founder, was sitting next to us and doing web pages for this agency guy, Andreas. So it was a strike of luck, and we talked with David, and he was not that interested from the start, because I guess that at the time they found us a bit odd and very, very visionary, and it was a crazy idea to some point before you actually visualize it. So, but we persuaded David to give it a go, and together also with Andreas, that made the first interface for us. And the service was actually called Scoop Search first. And we tried all sort of ways to find a really good URL with the .com ending. But at the end, we actually we managed to find Newsdesk. I can't remember actually where the name came from, why we thought it was such a good idea, but I think it had something to do with it was a general view that all the faxes, all the press releases went into media's news desks. So Aftonbladet, for example, had their news desk. And we found a really compelling idea to have a news desk for everybody else that didn't have their own news desk. So have a digital news desk where you can actually get your press releases as a freelancer to get that content and to do something interesting out of it. So at the time we were talking a lot with the association here in Sweden for freelancers, how they would like this kind of service. We also talked with Aftonbladet obviously and the bigger media, what kind of sort of how they would like to be addressed. So that was the start. And as I was we were 3 people at this moment, and we were helped by this ad agency. So the start was that I actually provided David with a PowerPoint of 200 slides outlining the whole service with all the functionality, all the buttons, and all the sort of the interface. And I think that he didn't use anything out of it. So that was actually, that's a good way of how we have been working together. So Christopher and myself are doing the visionary and the talking, and David has been really good at taking sort of the most important parts in and doing something great with that. So that has been that kind of relationship between us has been working for the last 10 years. Okay, so that was how it started, and so we were sitting at this agency, and soon we found out that we may have to grow a little, and in order to finance this, because we didn't have any external financiers or investors, we took odd jobs. We took extra jobs. Christopher was out doing TV4. I was a business development manager for Thomson, which is Thomson Reuters today. So we were going back and forth and really trying to get time and money to focus solely on Newsdesk. And actually, at the time we released the service in 2000, more or less actually in 2004, we thought that everybody should just understand what we were trying to do to disrupt the traditional PR industry and just run towards the service and just use it. And so the day we used it, we were like sitting and waiting for everybody to show up, and it was obviously completely empty or quiet. So it has totally been a great effort and a journey to educate the market, very much like what we did during the early days for the web, trying to teach people why they should use a website. And this quest was actually to get companies to use a press room better, to use the newsroom as a good starting point for communicating better with its important stakeholders, mainly journalists, obviously. But we were also definitely sort of out in this industry and talking about the new ways of doing things, and also addressing bloggers when they showed up. And that was around, when they got more popular, that was around 2005. And so we addressed the bloggers and told the blogger community that we believe that you are working very similar to journalists, and that makes it more interesting for us to also give you access to the service. So from the start, my Newsdesk, or Newsdesk at the time, were actually just a tool for journalists. And you had to register in order to reach all the content that you could find within the service. And needless to say, it's a bit of the hen and egg problem here, because what happens is that we had to fill the service with a lot of press releases, and before we had any journalists attending the site. So this was a sort of a double work where we told the journalists that there's a lot of content, and we told the companies that there's a lot of journalists. And then we worked a lot in order to get them both in there. And that suddenly sort of grew our content base, and it also slowly grew our journalist base. But this kind of sort of slow work also made it possible for us to be very clear towards the market that we were more a help, and we were a friend to the media and the journalists and the bloggers, and that worked very favorable for us. So that meant that suddenly we see the early adopters, the companies that really understand that this is an interesting thing. This is something that's going to disrupt this industry. They jumped on the train, and for example, NCC or sort of I think Skanska as well, like more traditional constructing companies, were actually jumping and becoming customers, one of our early customers. So that was a way for us to understand that more companies will eventually also understand this if this sort of slow and big, some of the slow and big companies could understand it. But very early we had sort of the focus on helping and providing this kind of service to small and medium enterprise. Smaller companies that normally didn't have the budget for PR or normally didn't have a PR agency that helped them out. They could now finally have a tool that made it possible for them to work so much more smarter and more effective. And that was obviously something that we also tried to talk to them directly about. We noticed that no one was writing about us, and so we were really poor on using PR for ourselves. But I tend to feel that that is just because we were a journalist tool, and it probably felt a bit awkward to talk about, for media to talk about that. Anyway, that's sort of the salvation for us to if we did a bad job or not. So the PR hasn't been sort of the most important part for ourselves in growing the company, but we have helped a lot of smaller companies to get their first stories out through us. And that has been a passion for all us that has been in the company for so many years, that this sort of model really works well. So if you have some time over, you should actually go in and look at some of the there is this web archive where you can actually find how we looked like several years ago, and it's hilarious to see how this beautiful service site that we have today, how that had evolved from what it was at that time. So that is all worth doing, and there has been a couple of phases where we sort of have gone from edition or version 0.1 to now I would say like version 3.0 or something like that. In order to grow and in order to get some kind of acknowledgement from the industry, we also had a very strong board. And at the time that was Jan Friedman, which was the chairman. He was the former sort of the left hand to Stenbeck, and he had left Kinnevik. But he was a very important man to have on board at that early stage. Also with us we had Pontus Schultz, which is now the editor of Veckans Affärer and one of the chief thinkers at Bonnier. Really smart and good guy. He told us, or his vision at least, was to become our vision, and that is that all companies will eventually be their own media. So a company will eventually be its own media hub. And that is actually a vision that we now can see pretty clearly in the end now in 2011, that it's really starting to be like that. And then we had Ove Johansson, a very important man, being the chairman for Swedish Radio, so the state-governed radio services. And also Joachim Berner, which was at the time, I think he was the chief editor of Dagens Nyheter at the time, I'm not sure, or if that was after. But as you see, clearly it was a very media-centric group of men. that could tell us and also tell us about media, what they are interested in, but also focus on the business within media. So in retrospective, maybe we lacked the knowledge of the web, the commercial side of the web, and I think that both Christopher and I felt that we were bringing that to the table, and obviously it's also good to take that from an external point of view, and I will get back to that, why that isn't so important. So that was the board, and we were focused on finding a business model because we were not keen on getting in a lot of financing and having a lot of owners telling us what to do. So we actually strived with this for 3 years without taking any salary, and that was made possible through the pretty successful exit from the spray venture for both Christopher and myself, and also the odd jobs I was talking about. So we're pretty proud of having sort of these early stages and this early period of handling the financing ourselves and not being pushed into some agreement with a risk capitalist or any other investors. But 2005, we actually came to a point where we started to look out for international expansion, because that has been the sort of the thinking at all the way, that this would be a great service to disrupt the Swedish market. We had a Swedish monopolist, but that Swedish monopolist, Cision, at the time, I think they changed name to Cision at 2005 or 6. At the time, they were a successful Swedish business, taking their business idea of providing media databases and going out in the world and provide that model. So Cision was at the time very successful, for example, in the States. They were losing money in the other markets in Europe and in Scandinavia, mainly due to their exposure towards physical monitoring. The thing I started to talk about, that they actually had a business where people actually cut out articles. And that part was losing money, but they were also their biggest sort of revenue source. So it was to our surprise that at some point when Cision started to focus more on the media database business and sending out press releases and actually cutting out and cutting away the unprofitable business of monitoring or analysis. And they sold that part at a later stage to Infopack. That was the company. So Infopack actually took over all the cuttings, the monitoring with cuttings, and then analysis part, and left Cision to start all over with the business of providing professional PR services through sending out press releases. Not at this time, actually, fax clinged off a bit. But mail obviously was a big method for getting press releases out, and a lot of players in the world are using wire services. So there's PR Newswire and Cision Wire and Market Wire, Real Wire, etc., etc. So the word in itself tells us that the business model runs on wire, and obviously we were very interested in finding more or less a name that went to the opposite, more or less unwire or something else. So we had to find a new name, and we had to leave the Newsdesk name in order for something new to come up, and that was the My before. So My came actually into the equation just because we had to have a .com address, and that we were lousy entrepreneurs that didn't understand this from the start. And the Newsdesk.com was actually a name from an old company in Germany that PR Newswire also bought up in 2004 or something like that. So that meant that if you printed in Newsdesk.com, you actually came to PR Newswire. So that was a very bad name. But My Newsdesk made us unique, and it was actually a better name because it's also easier to use a name which is not generic. So Newsdesk is a bit generic, and My Newsdesk was more ungeneric, but still told the community what we were trying to achieve or what we were providing. 2005, we're still at 2005, and then we tried to figure out if we wanted a venture capitalist or if we wanted an industry owner to take part in our journey. And that's when we found out that several of the media houses were starting to be interested with us. So we talked with TT in Sweden. We actually gave TT 30% of the company in order for us to call ourselves TT My News Desk or TT News Desk. And they declined, which I think that they are not very happy about today. And that is that was Raul Grünthal, which is now heading the Schibsted section, or heading Schibsted here in the Nordics. So that was pretty interesting to see that that the media houses was actually starting to pick up that this could be interesting, and they were actually acquiring a lot of media, sort of digital alternatives, more e-shops, or Schibsted, for example, bought Blocket, which was more sort of pretty similar to what we were doing, but actually selling sort of bikes and refrigerators. So if you look at My News Desk or News Desk, that was actually Blocket, but in a form of press releases or information. So all content from companies were to be gathered in one big hat. It could be images, very early with video, all kind of documents, press releases, etc., and to collect them in a big hat, in a big database, and get everybody that could be interested in that kind of content to go there and pick it up. So that was a very reverse way of doing it in the PR industry, but it was very trendy when it comes to e-shopping. That was the way that you did. You put the bike in a database, and everybody that was interested in the bike could go there, find the bike, and buy it and leave. And we had a lot of journalists at the time finding a good press release, finding a good scoop, or some other kind of image that could be interesting to use, and leaving. And that model worked. So we had pretty early, we had from struggling the first 3 years, we started to see how it took off with the journalist side. So at the time, I think we had almost 10,000 journalists in 2006 that sort of visited us, and people started to get up their eyes around this new phenomena that we were starting to become, even without no press or so much talk about it. I would say that most of the marketing was still done by Dojan and myself, wandering around in red suits and showing the community that we were not as other people, and that we were trying to do something else, something different. And that we got a lot of praise for trying to do something different, but we were also questioned how serious we were, you know, having this sort of red Santa Claus suits on us and interrupting all the events, mainly going, when everybody was seated down, just go to the front row, having My News Desk on your back. Obviously could piss some people off, but that's also where our values that I will come to later comes from. So we had a period from 2005 to 2008 where we were in the hands, or that we cooperated with the media company Edda Media, which was a fairly big Norwegian media company that owned a lot of local newspapers in Norway, but they didn't have any kind of sort of international reach out. So that means we were very limited in the international contacts with them, and our primary vision was actually to take My News Desk, or News Desk at the time, to globally. So, but they were acquired, or Edda Media were acquired by an English media mogul, friend of Murdoch, who bought a lot of newspapers around Northern Europe. So we also tended to feel that that could be interesting, but it actually turned out to be a sinker, because that meant that their engagement with us was lower, and they had to fight a lot of problems with their own newspapers. And so I was going back and forth to Oslo, and I didn't get much out of it. So, and this was in the end of 2005, and we did this for more or less 2 years. And at this time, we also started to have a revenue, a source of revenue, which was picking up. And we have always had the goal to leverage on the growth of revenue. Less important with the profit, but at least to have a plus-minus result, so that we were sort of great to go and have to use the money we had in order to continue doing the growth. So we got 5 million SEK from the AdaMedia guys, and we were very happy with that the first years. But then in 2008, we did a very smart thing. So I actually bought the shares from AdaMedia at the time, but I had also arranged for another Norwegian media company at the time to buy those shares. So that meant that in one day, which was 1 week before my wedding, we actually switched from one Norwegian media company to another. And the smartness around that was that the price of us would be, or the awkwardness to get that deal bag that deal, probably were very aware of that they were competitors. So it turned out very, very good, but it was a lot of struggle with all the paperwork during sort of that summer. And in August 2008, we finally found ourselves being majority owned by Norwegian media company NHST, which stands for Norsk Handelssjöfartstidning, which is more or less the sea industry newspaper. And they have been in place for at least sometimes during the 18th century. But they are now Norway's leading newspaper regarding business. So they were very focused on the business side. But they also have industry sectors. So they have the global newspapers for fishing, for oil and gas, for energy, renewable energy, also shipping and seafood. So they were more interesting for us in our ability to use the international aspect of their business to provide us with a platform to actually go abroad. And that was very interesting. So the sort of the third phase for my news desk started in 2008, where we got these owners in, and we cleared out the old structure. The old board went out and was replaced with Sven Tore Gran, which is the chairman today, with Andreas Emblem, which is the business developer manager director at NHST, which also could be translated to Gunnar's right hand regarding sort of the business side, and Gunnar, which is the group CEO, and he is also now taking place in our board. And we also have an external representative, Björn Stormoken, which is also working as a consultant to NHST, but is very clever with financials and mergers and that kind of deals. And actually working a lot here in Sweden as well, so it goes back and forth. So that is the current board that we're using today. At this time, we also started to show an interest in growing, using our growth, but also acquiring a profit. So from 2006, the numbers were increasing. I will talk in euros. So in 2006, our sales were up in 0.5 million euros. So every year we more or less doubled. So from 0.5 to 1 million euros to 1.8 million euros. And then 3 million euros in 2009, and then 4.9 million euros in 2010. So that meant that our growth was in the numbers with a growth of 65 to 100% every year, and that is considered very strong, very strong growth. and also very successful in terms of being a profitable growth. So from 2009 we showed a profit, and that was also something that we had as a goal. And since that we have been profitable as well. So very strong growth and not a very strong profit, but a profit around 6 to 8% margins, which is very consistent and also considered very successful in this industry so far. So 2011 ended in 7.2 million euros, and 2012 is projected being around 10 million euros, a bit over 10 million euros. So we'll see if that is consistent with the growth we have had. I would also like to mention that in terms of persons, we have had the same sort of amount of persons in relation to our sales figures, our growth. So they have been proportional. So that means that when we were 50 people, we also had in the equivalent of, which is 5 million euros, which is 50 million in Swedish kroner. So they have sort of been following each other at all times. And that is obviously something that is interesting to look upon and to see, because we're a web-based company, and we should be able to handle sort of the web-based thing with less people. But it's good to know in our history that they have been closely related. And our goal going forth, which was set the last year, was to go from 50 to 500, and that is in SEK. So that would mean 5 going to 50 million euros in 5 years, which many would consider a pretty strong growth trajectory. And that is also only possible probably due to a very smooth and good way of operating, what kind of people we bring into our business. And you are a very strong part of that notion, or the success, or our ability to actually achieve those numbers, and I would like to stress that. And that also brings me in on the value side. We have 4 very strong values that we are following, and those values are, which I'm going to go through, is also very related to our history and our culture. So that means that openness is one of the first we have had, and that was brought to the table more or less because we found all our competitors, all the industry players being not open, being very closed, very difficult to see what they were doing, only playing with the figures regarding sort of the numbers. Cision was, when we started, a monopolist, wearing black suit, blue tie, and performing multiple faxes. So that meant that being open about what we were doing, taking in all the transparency from the web company side, that segment, to show everybody what we were doing at all times, to discuss with people what we were doing and what we were trying to achieve, was really important for us. And as it has been shown during these years, with the growth of social media, that has played us very well in hand. So that meant that having the openness also made it possible for us to use social media very positively. We have always communicated what we're doing. We have always been very sort of aware of who we were talking to and why we're talking with them, and trying to engage in the community, helping out, etc. So when it comes to that, the openness part also is, the next one is the web enthusiasm, where we come from that area. We come much more from the web rather than being a specialist in PR or communication. We thoroughly believe that the web, or that it brings all digital more or less, is a way for companies to share and to communicate in a smarter way than before. So that means that we are constantly on the lookout for new things, how you can actually use that in order to communicate even better and even smarter. And that is in many times a bit compelling for the PR industry, which still are a bit interested in actually using media databases in order to reach out to as many as possible. So it still today, 10 years later, I still would say that it's an issue for us to help people understand why you should communicate in another way, or why you shouldn't just send out stuff without anyone just particularly interested in that. So using the web to engage rather than to publish has been a big thing for us. We have started to talk a lot about publishing stuff. As I was mentioning before around Pontus, helping companies to publish really easily is a vital part of my news desk. But the way we think that we will grow is the network part. It's the way to identify people and the one that cares and the one that's interesting for you to talk to, and to engage with them in a smarter way. So the engagement part is so much more important than the publishing part. And that takes us over to the pioneer stuff, which is the third value, which is really important for us to always try new things and always try to figure out to direct away from the status quo, to find new interesting ways to not only to communicate, to handle the PR, to handle the HR, which we call people, as you may know, how we recruit people, how we engage internally, how we engage externally with our customers, partners, etc., etc. We actually even call all our customers as colleagues, which was framed by Martin Garbaszek, I think, which I think is brilliant. It's a way to look upon your customers more or less as sort of the division between internally and externally is not important. And that way is very pioneering. That way to handle things is also something I would say modern. And that brings me on to the fourth value, that would be the brave enabler. Being brave means that you sometimes have to take risks. Sometimes you do stuff that wasn't very good. We have done tons of them in the past, and I thoroughly hope that we're going to do a lot of failures and mistakes in the future as well. So the brave part comes from not only being brave, but getting things done. And getting things done is more important than to wait and figure out the best way to do stuff. So the enabling part is vital, that comes from being brave. So being brave enables you to actually find new stuff that works better than the old ways. And also I would like to finish that off with that customers or our colleagues actually like that it's fun to always be on the lookout for new interesting stuff to do. And if there's customers that's not interested in that, maybe they can sort of linger on behind that, and when they are ready, they can jump on that wagon. But we can always provide the new stuff. We can always challenge our partners, suppliers, and customers. Right now, we are in a situation where we are a bit over 100 people. So we have gone into a phase where we actually now thrive to go from 100 to 500 people, which is a fairly big growth in any company, and that comes with a toll. That means that it's not chaotic. We use the structure, but we're trying hard not to get the structure to pull us down. To use structure in a way, in a method to actually grow in this pace is really important for us. So sometimes if you feel that not everything works, that's actually how it should be, because that makes us feel that we are constantly trying to achieve something better, that we're trying to improve in every little thing we do. So walk an extra mile and always try to find out what you can do differently and push that in yourself as well. When it comes to sort of the current business idea, and the business idea has been changing over the years. We have started out as a journalist platform, as I was into, but the market has pushed us, and the need from the customers have pushed us to a position today where we actually talk about us being a smarter platform, being a platform for not only PR people but also communicators in all sense. Like a marketer, this tool that we're providing, or these services we're providing, could be equally interesting for a market communicator than for a PR specialist. But, with important but, That is that it's probably not the same things that we say or sell to an information specialist and to a marketing specialist. They still work in different ways, but this is slowly growing together. We see that companies today are using modern PR to engage with stakeholders. That makes this sort of this membrane to go away, and that means that those two parties have to play together more and more. So I feel proud that we are a part of that. That our tool is actually providing that kind of integration, that both groups can work with us. But very mainly, we are still focused on the PR people. That is our origin. We come from that. And that is sort of our specific competence come from that. But we're very glad if we can help the market communicators and they also share our vision and our way to work. So that's really a great thing. We also add something in the equation when we talk about business idea, and that is that we offer premium services. So if you have a look at our service offer, that means that you can do stuff for free. You can actually send a press release or put in an image or even publish a video today for free. But then, when you need more services, you can actually add a subscription that gives you more services or gives you more functionality or more help, etc., etc. So we are in the business of providing help to all communicators, all information specialists regarding communication and PR, and we charge them for the more functionality and the more help and service and support they get. That is the idea, that's our business idea. We have never taken any kind of charge or money from the users, from the user side. That means the journalist or a blogger or even a competitor or a finance guy have never had to pay anything in order to get all this information. And that also makes us very sort of unique in this situation, where we suddenly have a fantastic database of fantastic content from all our colleagues and customers that they can use at all times. So if you go out now and if someone knows about my news desk, it's probably because it's very searchable on Google. You see our brand all over at all times. And that's really interesting to see how that actually now, 10 years later, has started to work. And not only in Sweden, not only in Norway, not only in Finland, Denmark. We see it happen in all parts of the world where we are engaged. And at the time, right now, we have around 6 customers from 60 different markets or regions or countries. And that makes me very proud, and I thoroughly hope that we will also have physical allocation in all those markets at some point, because this is a personal business. This is, even if you talk about digital, it's also very evident for us that the customer needs to meet up with us, to get education, to get sort of the personal belonging and a relation with us. So our vision is, being the founder vision, is definitely that we want to share all this with people, but use the digital channel, use our digital format in order to reach out as broad as possible. So the vision in itself would state that we are more or less a company that want to do this globally. We want to offer the service on a global platform and being there for more or less every company, every organization that wants to tell a story in a good and new engaging way. And we are very, very good we have come a long way to achieve that. But we need these extra years ahead of us to really put that in place and to wash all over the global arena as well to do that. And that's very engaging and something that I think that everybody that's engaged in this company see in front of them and can have as a glowing star that we want to reach towards that. We don't have to say that we should be the best player or the biggest, even the biggest one, but just to provide what we're doing to distant parts around the globe is really engaging for us. So the mission to more or less to end up with that would be that we create conditions. We create conditions for companies to share their stories, but also engage with what other people could be interested in. It's not always, it's really important to not forget that it's not about pushing out stuff. It's not about trying to push your story or your message to others. It's about listening into them and understand what they are thrived upon, or what their driving forces are, and then to help them, to give them that kind of engagement. That could be in content, that could be in wordings, that could be in other forms. Whatever it will be, we will be a facilitator of that communication. We will try to have those two players, companies, organizations, and their stakeholders, to talk smarter with each other. So we're right now at the stage in the last interesting minutes of 2011, and we're going to have a stellar year this year as well, putting down around 7.2 million euros in sales and being profitable, which is a great achievement. But the goal for next year is to grow at the same pace, to grow well over the 100, being a 100 million SEK company, which would be translated to a 10 million euro company. And that means that the growth in itself will be a trajectory to reach the 50 million euros. And we will have a strong incoming sort of reinforcement of the staff. And we really are strengthening up all the different departments in order to reach that goal. And it's really important that we always thrive through our different sales processes, but that we have a strong support organization around that. So I would like to stress our ability to work with the different departments in a team-based effort to achieve this goal. And that's nothing that you sort of, nothing that comes easily. So we have a series of ideas on how to execute and to continue on this growth. And one important issue would obviously be that we're now also entering the US market for the coming year. That will make us having a node in US. To provide Americas with support, and also those time zones. We have an office in UK, which already are picking up a lot of speed, and hopefully we will have the ability to use that as a node for the rest of Europe. But we are right now focused a lot on the UK market, which is I think it's the second largest PR industry in the world. So we have a lot to do there before we start go out on other markets. But we get a lot of requests from Germany, from Spain, from Italy, from Holland, etc. So there is a lot of players that actually are monitoring us and see that we are coming and are interested in engaging with us instead of competing with us. And I find that very interesting. And then we have Singapore, which I will also attend to in a couple of weeks, and coming down there, because Singapore is really important for us more on a long-term perspective, where we see the Asian market is really picking up when it comes to PR. It has been extremely slow. They have been more focused on the marketing side, but now they understand that the PR and the marketing and using brand in order to get exposure, not only in the Southeast Asian markets, but around to Europe or over to US, makes us sit in a situation where we can actually help small companies up to multinational companies to engage and get their message out on all the markets that could be necessary for them. So it's more or less just now is more of a language issue, how we could handle that from a language perspective. But we have nodes in all those regions that makes us really interesting for a small company that may have small markets, but on different markets, and the multinationals that have operations on multi-markets, a lot of markets. So the Scandinavian part is our strongest part. That means we have a Finland operation, we have a Danish operation, and a Norwegian operation, and obviously 3 offices here in Sweden. And that makes us very strong in Scandinavia, and that has been one of the first goals, were to be the market leader here in the Nordics. and we have seen how competitors are pulling out from these markets, but we are doing the opposite. We are strengthening our efforts in those markets, and we also already have those language editions in place, which makes us in a very good situation to handle all those companies that would like to engage on a Nordic level.